Seriously, if there's anyone willing to hire someone with such low qualifications, let me know. Well, that's if such a fool exists.
It's Major Bank's final interview. I was trembling with anger at being mocked for my evening high school degree right there. All right, please wait a moment. If you want to see him that badly, I'll call him. Just as he wished, when that fool arrived, the interviewer turned pale. The person I called was, "My name is David Miller. I'm 20, and I just graduated from an evening high school this spring. Originally, due to my dad's work situation, I had lived in France from the time I was born and came back to the US when I was in 8th grade. But I was born and raised in the France. Even though my parents are both Americans, I mainly spoke French in my daily life and had shaky English skills. I had difficulty communicating in English, did not fit in at school, and was always alone. After graduating from middle school, I went on to a night school. Once there, my classmates at the night school were of various ages, genders, and backgrounds. No one made fun of my shaky English. Instead, they kindly helped me out. There were folks older than me, so I never felt out of place. On the contrary, more people started asking me to teach them French. I had no friends and didn't know how to socialize, and at first, communication was hard. But as days went by and I got used to my classmates, who couldn't fit in during middle school, made many friends. Middle school was a place of fear with no enjoyment, but high school allowed me to live each day with joy and fulfillment. Now, I'm in front of a major bank. The brand new suit I'm wearing is recently purchased. Today, I have an interview at this bank. The idea of me having an interview at such a big bank was surprising. While holding my hand to my rapidly beating heart out of nervousness, I recalled the many words of encouragement I received. All right, let's do this. I took a deep breath and started walking. When I spoke to a staff member inside, I was guided to what might be the interview room, with a sign that read conference room.
Please wait here until you are called.
Understood, thank you. I thanked the person who showed me in and sat down on the provided chair. I waited for about 10 minutes.
Sorry for the wait. We will begin the interview now. Please come in.
Yes, thank you. I was called by a woman inside, took another deep breath, and entered the room.
Please take a seat.
Thank you. As soon as I entered the room, the woman asked me to sit down, and I took my seat, tense and nervous. The interviewer was a man named Mitchell, and the record-keeping lady who had just spoken to me. After I took a seat, Mitchell stared at the resume I had sent in advance and immediately let out a heavy sigh.
Well, all right then. Shall we begin the interview?
Oh, yes, thank you. I felt uneasy with Mitchell's casual approach, but I wondered if perhaps he was interviewing me during an exceptionally busy time, so I adjusted my attitude and replied accordingly. However,
You're a high school diploma?
yes,
And it was an evening program. I see.
murmuring to himself, he looked genuinely annoyed and propped his chin up with his hand.
Your name is Miller, right?
Yes,
A returnee from France, but with this educational background. Well,
I noticed the job posting didn't require a specific educational background.
Yes, well, but who would have thought someone with just a high school diploma would apply, especially from an evening program?
Excuse me, but is there an issue with coming from an evening high school program? I couldn't help but sense the sting in his words, so I dared to ask. However, in the next moment, he burst out laughing.
This is hilarious.
Sorry.
No, my apologies. I just didn't expect such an obvious question.
Obvious? What's he talking about?
Miller, you asked if there's a problem with attending an evening program. Of course there is.
What?
After all, evening high schools are where those who couldn't make it to regular high schools end up, right? Moreover, you didn't even go to college, did you? Isn't that just a nest of issues? Who would want to hire such low-tier candidates? If there's someone out there willing to hire them, please let me know. But I doubt there's anyone that foolish.
Laughing uproariously, he seemed to find his own words so funny that tears formed in his eyes. The record-keeping lady, on the other hand, didn't even glance at him and appeared to be silently typing down the conversation. All I could hear in the room were Mitchell's laughter, the lady's typing, and the subtle trembling of my anger. Should I have just stayed silent? Who does this guy think he is? No matter his position, does he think it's okay to treat a serious job applicant who came for an interview like this? Being ridiculed to this extent and feeling so unwelcome in an interview, I'd honestly want to walk out right now. But leaving now, after being made a fool of, really rubs me the wrong way, and more than anything, I just can't let it go. Understood?
Huh?
Understood. Can I take a moment of your time?
What are you?
Overcome by anger, a deep, gruff voice emerged from me, deeper than I had anticipated. But when Mitchell, who seemingly expected me to tuck tail and run, heard my voice, he noticeably flinched. He seemed deeply shaken by my demeanor. Seeing that, I realized I needed to remain calm. Taking a deep breath, I said, "Excuse me for a moment," and pulled out my mobile from my bag.
What are you doing? We're in the middle of an interview?
He stared at me and I glared back. Well, wasn't it you? Who said you wanted to see?
Huh?
You want to see someone like me, the bottom of the barrel, getting hired, right?
Hey, what are you getting at? Are you mocking me?
I'd never mock. I'm just about to call the fool who hires the bottom of the barrel, so please wait a moment. Emphasizing the fool who hires the bottom of the barrel, he seemed to shrink under my gaze, falling silent. I, while keeping my gaze fixed on him, pressed the call button. The person on the other end picked up immediately.
Hello, what's up?
I'm sorry, the interviewer is asking for you. Can you come?
Got it. I'll be right there.
Because I had the call on speaker, Mitchell heard the voice too.
What? What just happened?
His face grew paler by the second. He stood up, seemingly in a panic, pacing the room, then sat back down, visibly distraught. I didn't say a word, just watched him. A few minutes later, he must have really come right away. The conference room door opened, and there was a palpable tension in the air.
Excuse me.
Upon seeing the man in his 60s who entered, Mitchell practically fell over himself in his rush to bow deeply.
Thompson, Why are you here?
Why didn't you call for me? I just came because I was summoned. Is there a problem?
The man referred to as Thompson gave a pale Mitchell a brief look, then turned to me.
Sorry for the wait.
No worries. I apologize for calling you out of the blue.
That's all right. After all, I asked you for this favor in the first place, so no need to fret.
The person I called on the phone, it was Mike Thompson, the CEO of this bank.
So what the heck happened?
He glanced between me, Mitchell, and the female secretary. As I was wondering where to begin, Mitchell hurriedly approached Thompson. Thompson raised his eyebrows in dismay at Mitchell's fluster.
Thompson, you misunderstand. I didn't call for you. I was just telling him that based on his qualifications, he wasn't fit for the job. Then, for some reason, he called you. Wait, how did you even get CEO's contact?
It seemed Mitchell finally realized something was off. This is a bit awkward to say, but this is Thompson, the CEO you were eager to see. The fool who hires bottom feeders like me. After introducing him with a warm smile, Mitchell stared at me, mouth agape, looking utterly defeated.
What's going on here?
Nothing much, really. I'm just a regular guy here for an interview. However, I've known Thompson for years, and he recommended me for this position.
You're lying.
Thompson, nodding in agreement with my words, chimed in, "It's no lie. David is someone I've kept an eye on for years. I heard he graduated high school recently, and I wanted him to work for us, so I scouted him."
You personally? Thompson, if that's the case, why did he even need an interview? Why was I involved in?
That Mitchell was to keep an eye on you.
Excuse me.
Mitchell, with a look of complete confusion, was met by Thompson's piercing gaze.
Last month, I received a complaint from someone who had interviewed with us.
A complaint?
The man in charge of the interview, Mitchell, had a terrible attitude.
What?
I've received such complaints before, not just about you. People have different perspectives and interpretations, but in the last few months, there's been an unusual spike in similar complaints. And every single one points to you, Mitchell. They say you laughed at their resumes, mocked their appearances. The complaints varied, but they all centered on you.
That's a misunderstanding. I would never.
Then what about what David just said earlier?
That he made that up. He's trying to frame me.
Is that so?
Yes. I never said any such thing. Not today. Not in any previous interviews.
Thinking he could brush it off with just a nod from Thompson, he began to ramble on. He was completely oblivious to the fact that there wasn't a hint of a smile in Thompson's eyes.
Mitchell.
Yes.
If what you're saying is indeed true, we'll need to thoroughly investigate everything that's happened up till now. First, we should confirm the rumors David mentioned. Have you got the records?
Yes, here they are.
Thank you.
What's that?
The one approached by Thompson was a quiet female secretary who had been present the whole time. She nodded in response to Thompson's voice and handed something she pulled out from her pocket to him.
Everything from the earlier interview has been recorded on this. We need to check it now and verify whose story holds up.
Watching Thompson swing the voice recorder, Mitchell broke into a cold sweat and just collapsed right there. He probably realized he couldn't pull the wool over anyone's eyes. In his frustration, he snapped at the woman, "Hey, did you deceive me?" However, Thompson intervened. "It's what I gave her. I was hoping it'd serve as evidence to clear your name." "What do you mean by deceived? You've got nothing to hide, right? If so, shouldn't you be grateful this exists?"
Oh,
Mitchell was at a loss for words and hung his head in defeat.
Mitchell, now isn't the time to make excuses, lash out in anger, or remain silent.
At Thompson's words, Mitchell slowly stood up and said, "I'm truly sorry." However, frightened by Thompson, who raised his voice saying, "You're apologizing to the wrong person," he reflexively turned to face me. In a barely audible voice, he whispered, "I'm truly sorry. Apologizing to me."
You, stay home for a while. I'll inform you about the disciplinary actions later.
With Mitchell looking downcast, I left the room with Thompson.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. I was led by him into a lounge. While enjoying a cup of tea that the secretary had made for me, he apologized to me with a grave look.
I'm deeply sorry for causing you distress, even if it was for auditing purposes. I truly am.
"Please, it's okay." Mitchell was really harsh earlier. It got to me, and I retaliated. "I'm sorry."
It's all right. You're the one who endured. If anyone is ridiculed without reason, it's understandable to be angry. You're especially quick-witted, so you must have been able to keep your cool, as expected of a genius.
Please stop, that's all in the past. Even when I was in France, I always excelled academically more than others. By the time talks of returning to the US started at home, I was already studying at a high school level, having skipped grades. However, I could not speak English, so I transferred to an American junior high school. I had to study topics in English, a language I wasn't accustomed to, even though I had already covered them back in France.
You know, I often wonder just how far you would have gone if you had stayed in France.
Yeah, I wonder that myself. I guess if that was the case, maybe by now I'd be studying at a prestigious university in France. Perhaps conducting research or even working after completing college. The possibility of having started a business existed too. When I think of all the potential paths, there's a sense of regret. However, I'm quite content with where I am now.
Well, I wanted to witness your potential firsthand, which is why I wanted you here.
He indeed gave me this opportunity for the interview. You're overestimating me.
No, it's not, but I didn't expect Mitchell to be so much. You must be exhausted. Take a break, okay?
Thank you. I had heard it was just a formality of an interview, so I was taken aback when I was asked to cooperate with information about Mitchell. In the end, I too said some immature things, but I'm relieved it all seemed to settle down. How did a regular guy like me get to know the CEO of a major bank, Thompson? If asked, I would answer, because he's my benefactor. I first met him during the summer of my 8th grade. I wasn't adjusting well to school. The subjects were all too easy and uninteresting, and English was challenging with many unfamiliar things. Everything wasn't going well for me, with my teenage rebellious phase hitting hard. I began wandering the streets of the entertainment district late at night. One night, While wandering through the neon-lit streets as usual, it was Thompson who approached me.
You're a junior high kid, aren't you? What are you doing out this late?
What's it to you, old man? Mind your own business.
That's rude to call me an old man.
You look every bit the part. Or should I say geezer?
A bit early to be called that.
I remember being taken aback when, despite my sarcastic tone, he began laughing cheerfully. After that, every time I went to the entertainment district, he would inevitably show up. He'd always ask me, "What are you doing out this late?" But he never once told me to go straight home. I think he might have been approaching other kids like me, knowing that each of us had our own burdens, so he deliberately never told us to go home. At first, I found him annoying, but over time, I began to open up to him, who would listen to everything and affirm me.
Too easy classes and unfamiliar English. It sounds frustration is going to build up.
You get it, old man.
Of course, I ain't a fool, you know. You're sharp and have a good head on your shoulders. The gap between who you were in France and who you are now must have been tough.
While he did scold me for being out so late, he never once negated my character, way of life, or the feelings I had nowhere to channel.
I get not wanting to go to school, but you really should graduate from high school. You, my friend, are meant to soar globally. Don't get disappointed by the limited world of American middle school. Explore the broader world. Meet many people, build connections. One day, you might think back and be glad you went to school properly. How about evening classes? There, you wouldn't stand out.
I'm truly grateful to him, who introduced me to a night school at that time, 1 month after the interview incident. Despite some hiccups, I ended up working at this bank as planned. The training is tough, but the senior folks around me are all really supportive and have been a big help. Amidst all this, there came a day when the training was nearing its end. I came across some data and found myself scratching my head. There was a series of numbers I hadn't seen before. Feeling suspicious, I consulted with a colleague. He too was unfamiliar with it. He quickly spoke to our boss, and I also sought advice from Thompson. Upon further investigation, it turned out that the data was a record of unauthorized withdrawals. In other words, embezzlement records. Surprisingly, the perpetrator was caught quite easily. It was Mitchell. After the whole interview fiasco, he had been demoted from his HR position to a regular desk job. Perhaps he couldn't stand having to follow to younger employees, whom he'd always looked down upon. Rather than buckling down and working hard, he was cold-heartedly cheating the elderly and robbing them of their savings. He also lied about collecting insurance premiums to scam money and colluded with subcontractors to inflate expenses and embezzle. He'd been involved in multiple sneaky and despicable crimes. Under Thompson's guidance, when we looked deeper, more and more Mitchell's crimes came to light. The stolen amount was substantial. Mitchell was soon arrested by Thompson's cop friend, William. Given the number of victims, the news covered the story, which tanked the bank's reputation. Seeing Thompson apologize on TV was painful, but he said to me, "Thanks to you, we could resolve this before it got any worse." I really appreciate it. Moreover, people around me often remarked how observant I was, and I was grateful to find myself given more responsibilities. The day the issue with Mitchell was finally resolved, I was at the bar with Thompson and William. They said it was a belated celebration for starting my job. I had known William for some time, too, and the three of us chatted away.
I'd love to have a drink with you someday.
What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Had too much to drink.
I ain't drunk yet. Don't treat me like an old man.
You say that, but you're over 70, right? You're definitely an old-timer.
Shut it. Right from our first meeting, you called me an old man.
Well, you already seemed old back then.
I might have been old, but back in the day, I was what they called a silver fox.
Ha ha ha. Self-proclaimed Silver Fox Thompson, maybe drunk, fell asleep right there. As he muttered my name in his sleep with a hint of resentment, William started talking softly. Turns out, Thompson had a rough past, rougher than mine, and he had lost a younger colleague in a tragic accident.
After that accident, he started doing nighttime patrols, vowing to protect kids so something like that would never happen again.
Is that so?
He wanted to ensure young folks didn't get into trouble. Whenever he saw kids on the streets, he'd approach them. Sometimes they'd run, and sometimes he'd get beaten up, like they were mugging an old man. That neighborhood was filled with such rough folks, so seeing someone like you, who'd talk back but wouldn't lay a hand, was rare. He always had a soft spot for you. Now it's your turn to give back.
I planned to, without being told. Responding to him like that, I found myself nodding a few times in my head. I see. I was spotted on those night strolls and was being watched over to ensure I didn't get into any trouble, huh? Back then, everyone seemed like an enemy, and I hadn't realized his efforts. It's a bitter pill, but I owe where I am today to Thompson. Thank you, Thompson. I'll push even harder. Saying my thanks to him, I felt like he smiled even in his sleep. I'll return the favor you did for me. So please, live a long life, Thompson. My mother gave birth to me out of wedlock and was disowned by her parents, forcing her to leave home. She realized that by using systems like food stamp, TANF, she could manage to get by, even though we were poor, so she chose not to work. Our neighbors were a couple with a son who was bedridden from birth, unable to walk or speak well due to his illness. Since the neighbor lady stayed at home to care for her son, my mother, seeing an opportunity, would leave me, still a young child, with them for about 2 hours while she went gambling. Of course, she never said she was going out to gamble. She always came up with some reason, like she had a doctor's appointment or had to go to the city office. Sometimes she left me there for over 4 hours, and when the neighbor lady expressed concern, my mother simply stopped leaving me there, saying, "It's fine." After that, I started staying home alone. I didn't go to kindergarten, so I had no friends and no one to talk to. When I went to the park alone, I always saw the children who had brought their mothers, and that made me feel jealous. The neighbor lady noticed my circumstances and approached me in the park and took me to her home. For me, who only eats instant foods or some breads from the supermarket, the foods she made were warm and delicious. She listened kindly to my stories, which made me very happy. Her son, John, was 5 years older than me.
John, our little friend Adam is here. Isn't that nice?
She called out, and John waved his hands to express his joy. That somehow made me happy too.
John has no friends. If you had any time, would you come and play again?
I nodded vigorously to her words. As a kid, I was happy. It was not because she pitied my poverty and sympathized with me, but because she invited me as a friend of her son. And so, I started visiting their house from time to time, enjoying their meals and talking to John. When I started elementary school, I finally started going to school for the first time in my life. My classmates had already learned to read and write, and could do calculations, as they had gone to preschool or kindergarten. Compared to them, I knew nothing and had to start learning from scratch. I was teased for being stupid and felt sad. I was sad and depressed, thinking about why I was different from everyone else. Regardless of my protest scores or the teacher's comments that I needed more education at home, my mother continued gambling every day. It was more than just a hobby, and it had become an addiction. It was obvious even to everyone. Even when we were shopping together, she would stop as soon as she saw something related to gambling. She would walk in a daze towards it, look at it, and tells me to go home, then she goes gambling. Whenever she saw numbers while shopping, she would remember gambling and become restless. She would hand me the shopping bag and say, "I'll be back later," then head off to play. Even when watching TV at home, if a gambling commercial came on, she would react and say, "I'll be back in a bit," then leave. I was scared of my mother because she seemed to be controlled by something. That night, I woke up to the sound of crackling flames, smoke, and a strange smell. Fire was raging. "It's on fire." Looking around, my mother was nowhere to be found. It seemed that she had gone out to play while I was sleeping. My heart was pounding. Fear of death approaching made my entire body shake. At that moment, the face that came to mind was not my mother's, but the neighbor lady's. I mustered up the courage to run out of the house and rang the doorbell of the neighbor's house and pounded on the door.
"What's the matter, this late at night?"
John's father, who opened the door, wasn't angry but looked worriedly at my face. "Sir, fire. Our house is on fire." I couldn't explain well because I was panicked, but he just nodded at me, instructed me to wait there, and headed to my house. The lady who had gotten up held me tightly with a worried expression on her face.
"It's on fire. Call 911. We need to evacuate."
He came back quickly, shouted out, and I helped the lady put John in his wheelchair and we ran out of the house. Concerned that the elevator might stop, he carried John on his back down the stairs, while the lady and I carried the folded wheelchair from behind. Fire trucks arrived within 5 minutes and started firefighting immediately. I watched in disbelief as flames billowed from my house. Suddenly, a shrill yell echoed from behind me.
"Adam, what the hell have you done?"
My mother, who had come back from gambling, was so flustered and ran up to me.
"Do you have any idea how much this fire is going to cost us in damages? Don't mess around."
She grabbed me by the collar, hysterically yelling and shaking me violently. Then her hand was brushed off.
"Mrs. Summers, you're the one who should be blamed here. Leaving your son alone late at night. What were you even doing? Instead of blaming your son, you should be thankful he's safe."
John's father stood in front of me, vehemently condemning my mother.
"I don't need any advice from you."
My mother glared at him, her face twisted in frustration. Further investigation revealed that my mother had left an electric heater on when she left the house, which had set a nearby blanket on fire. Thankfully, due to a quick response, only our house was affected by the fire. It was a grateful for small mercies. Even though my mother delivered a parting shot like that, she had nowhere else to go, so we both ended up staying at the neighbor's house for a while. One day, when I came home from elementary school, my mother was sitting across from a stranger, talking. "Hey, who's that?" John's mother gave me an uncomfortable look and told me it was a person from CPS. But at that time, I didn't know what that meant or implied.
We've determined that you lack the ability to raise your son properly, so we will be taking him into our care and placing him in an orphanage.
I heard their words and froze. I didn't fully understand the complexities of the situation, but I knew I was about to be separated from my mother and live somewhere far away.
Initially, I didn't plan to have a kid. Just take him.
I felt a lump in my throat and my eyes stinging at my mother's muttered words. I knew my mother didn't like me, but I believed that there should be some bond between us because we shared the same blood. I just wanted to believe. Then suddenly, John's mother broke in.
Are you even a mother?
It was the first time I had seen her showing such a fierce and emotional.
What? I just told the truth. I bet you're envious of me for having a healthy child, while yours is disabled. But to me, he's just a burden. If it weren't for him, I would be so much freer.
My mother's words were cut off by John's mother's resounding slap.
I will raise Adam. I won't even let him go to an orphanage. My husband and I will raise him with love.
The CPS staff, who was taken aback, intervened.
If you wish to adopt him officially, please let us know. We can guide you through the process.
After that, when John's father came home, we all sat down for a serious discussion, and it was decided that I would be adopted by them. The day my mother left the house, without a glance in my direction, she walked out the front door. My mother was asked to pay $5,000 for the fire damages, but she said she had no money, so John's father stepped in and paid for her. But everyone knew that she would never repay that money.
I'm sorry, Adam, that we had to take you away from your mother.
She apologized with a regretful face, so I shook my head. If it wasn't for you two, I might not be alive right now. I'm happy that you're my family. Hearing this, John's father wiped away tears and knelt down to my level.
Right, we're already a family. You have nothing to worry about.
Despite not moving or changing schools, news that I had been adopted by my neighbors spread quickly. Not only that, but rumors about my mother's gambling addiction and the fact that they had a disabled child also spread, and I became a target of ridicule and bullying. But I didn't let it get to me. I was grateful to John's mother and father, who had given me clean clothes, a safe home, and a family who treated me with love, all of which were a stark contrast to my previous life. I studied hard to make them proud, found friends who accepted me, and started to enjoy school. I began to call them Dad, Mom, and Brother, because I wanted to be a real family. After my dad and mom expressed their surprise and their eyes grew wide, they hugged me joyfully and called me Adam. This was the first time someone had held me so tightly and warmly like this. I had daily conversations with my older brother about school, friends, games. I often showed him a book of ocean photographs because he was thrilled when I showed him photos of the sea I took before. My brother especially loved a photo of a particular beach in California, and he would become excited and convey his joy by moving his arms and legs every time he saw it. "I'll take you to this beach someday," I told him. My words excited him even more, and he started flapping his arms and legs, which earned a reprimand from our mother. As I started to take care of my brother and transport him to the hospital, I began to dream of working at a facility for the disabled. It's a harsh reality to face, but I know our parents will pass away someday. If that happened and I was at home taking care of my brother, I wouldn't be able to support him enough. So, I thought it would be best to work at a facility for the disabled and have my brother looked after there. However, my brother passed away the year I started high school. Our parents had been told at his birth that he would not be alive until 20, so they were somewhat prepared. But that didn't lessen the pain of loss. Seeing our mother sit still in my brother's room, our father repeatedly looking through my brother's photo album, I understood how deeply they were grieving his loss. I felt a profound regret that I hadn't been able to do anything for my parents or my brother. After that, I graduated from a technical school specializing in care and started working at a facility for the disabled. Even after my brother's death, my desire to reduce the burden on families with disabilities and make their lives a little easier hadn't changed. The month after I received my first paycheck, I took my parents to California. That was the beach I had promised to take my brother to someday. An emerald green sea stretched out on both sides of the long bridge that seemed to continue forever. Standing in front of the view from the beach, I held up a portrait of my brother. "We've come to the beach you wanted to visit, big bro," I said. My mom let out a sob and my dad choked up. "Dad, Mom, I'm sorry. I couldn't fulfill my brother's dream while he was alive. I couldn't repay my debt to you guys." As I apologized through my tears, my mom took my hand.
That's not true, Adam. Thanks to you, our son was able to fulfill many dreams.
As I looked at them in confusion, my dad continued.
John couldn't go to school for the disabled and didn't know what school was like. We felt sorry for John and couldn't talk about school. When we heard you were talking to John about school, we realized we were wrong.
My father explained how my brother could imagine himself going to school, making friends, studying, and enjoying student life through my stories.
I'm sure he's in heaven right now, flapping his arms and legs with joy, knowing that you've remembered and brought him here.
The image of my brother doing just that brought a smile to my face.
Thank you for becoming his brother. Thank you for becoming our son. Adam, you are also making our dream come true. The dream of seeing our son grow up.
My dad nodded in agreement with my mom's words.
Ever since we adopted you, no, from the moment we met you, Adam, you've been our savior.
My dad added. I couldn't stop the tears. Blood ties didn't matter. These people who had raised me with such love were my true parents and family. 5 years later, I married a woman I worked with at the same facility, and we had a daughter.
I never imagined I'd get to see my son get married, let alone hold a grandchild. I'm so happy.
My wife, Catherine, is listening to my mom's words with a smile. She had been left at an infant home after her birth and raised in an orphanage, so she didn't know her biological parents. After hearing about her background, my parents told her, "From now on, think of us as your real parents." My wife nodded, tears streaming down her face. This scene reminded me of when I was adopted. Today, we came to visit my brother's grave. "Big bro, this is your niece, Hannah. You've got a niece now," I told him. Seeing my brother's grave, Hannah giggled with delight. I am incredibly grateful to have met my parents and brother, who accepted me and gave me a place to belong. Along with my new family, my wife and daughter, I vowed to repay my parents not only for what I owe them but also for what I couldn't give back to my brother.
Stop it.
As I headed for my first business meeting of the afternoon, I heard a woman's voice near the turnstiles at the subway station I'd just gotten off at. Looking towards the voice, I saw a man bothering a woman with long hair. He was wearing a suit but seemed drunk, not behaving like your typical businessman.
Come on, lady, spend some time with me. I've got money.
The man was now, shockingly, slapping the woman's cheek with a wad of cash.
How about $300?
Stop it. I'll call the cops.
Cops, just because an old guy like me talks to a young girl, it's a crime.
Seeing the man grab the woman's arm, I felt I couldn't just stand by and watch. Excuse me, but what you're doing isn't right. The woman looked up at me as if seeking help. Nodding in response to her plea, she pushed the man's hand away.
Oh, are you her boyfriend or something?
No, just a passerby.
Then mind your own business. Or were you after this lady too?
Annoyed by the man's crude laugh, I took out my phone. I'm calling the police. Suddenly, as if he'd snapped back to reality, the man lunged at me, trying to grab my phone.
Don't meddle in this.
Stop it. I felt his boozy breath close to me and then, out of nowhere, he headbutted me. Ouch. I felt a sharp pain deep inside my nose, and the next thing I knew, blood was pouring out.
Help! Someone help!
Hearing the woman scream, the man threw away my phone and bolted.
I'm so sorry this happened because of me.
You're not to blame. Don't worry about it, I replied, thinking about how I would now be heading to a business meeting with a bloodied face.
Here, use this.
The woman handed me a handkerchief while I was trying to stop the nosebleed. It had a beautifully embroidered four-leaf clover on it. It's too pretty to use.
It's meant to be used, not just kept as decoration.
She wiped the blood from my face with the handkerchief.
You are on your way to work, right? I'm really sorry.
Suddenly remembering the time, I checked my watch and gratefully said, "Thank you," taking the handkerchief.
Contact me if your injury gets worse.
She then handed me a business card. It read Sarah Sullivan, and even with the title CEO on it. You're a CEO?
Just a one-woman show. Started my own business in college. I develop apps.
Wow, that's impressive. Oh, well, I'm off to work then. I'll wash and return the handkerchief.
No need to worry about that. Thank you, and good luck with your work.
Both nodded to each other in acknowledgement. I rushed off to meet my customer. The company I worked for dealt with medical equipment. This meant my clients were primarily hospitals and research facilities. My visit today was scheduled for a major local hospital in Chicago. I arrived at the reception just in the nick of time and was immediately escorted to the administrative director's office. Thank you for making time for me today. I handed over my business card as a gesture of greeting, but the director's gaze seemed to drift off upon seeing my face, and the initial smile had disappeared. Today, I've brought the detailed brochure about the genetic testing kit we discussed last time. I showed him the presentation documents I had prepared and continued to explain patiently and comprehensively. However, the director's response wasn't very enthusiastic. It seemed as though he wasn't listening. Moreover, our eyes didn't meet. The director's gaze seemed to be fixed slightly below my eyes. Please do consider my proposal.
Understood.
Do you have any question?
No, I got the gist of it, but...
What is it?
Well, in the medical field, we always want to treat human bodies and lives with the utmost care and respect.
I was taken aback by the sudden shift in conversation but nodded earnestly.
That should be the case even outside of a medical setting.
Yes, I believe it's a noble approach.
I'd like not only my staff, but also vendors who visit our hospital to embrace this mindset.
Of course.
So, why is there blood on the collar of your shirt? Did you get into a fight or something?
I was taken aback. I had checked myself in the restroom mirror at the station. I had wiped off the blood on my face. My nose was slightly swollen but looked fine, and I had even used a damp handkerchief Sarah had lent me to soothe the area. But I hadn't noticed the blood splatter on my collar. That was where the director's gaze had been fixed all along. I deeply apologize for causing any discomfort. I recounted the incident at the station. I had intervened when a woman was being harassed by a drunk man and ended up getting headbutted, causing my nose to bleed. The director, who seemed skeptical of my story, changed his expression when I took out the handkerchief I had borrowed.
Can I see that handkerchief?
Sure, but I haven't washed it yet.
It's fine. You don't have any blood-borne diseases, right?
Oh no, I'm okay. I hesitantly handed over the damp handkerchief. Upon seeing the clover embroidery and the initials sewn into the handkerchief, the director nodded.
Did you catch the name of the woman who gave this to you?
Yes, she gave me her business card. It's Sarah Sullivan. While speaking, I glanced at the director's name tag. It read Kevin Sullivan. They shared the same surname, Sullivan. Oh, your name is Sullivan too, could it be?
Yes. Sarah is my daughter. So you were the one who helped Sarah and got hurt.
No, I didn't really get hurt, and I wouldn't say I helped, I just kind of butted in.
I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions, thinking it was a fight without even asking why. I was very rude. I apologize.
No, not at all. We both apologized and said not to worry to each other. We both realized this and laughed.
Not because of this, but I'll be sure to read your presentation thoroughly and contact you later.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. For a moment, I was on edge, but in the end, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Later on, I received a message from Sarah. We decided to meet up at a cafe. I washed and ironed the handkerchief I had dirtied, but I also prepared a new one as a gift.
You didn't have to give me such a gift. I should be the one thanking you.
No, I've already received a gift from you.
What do you mean?
I explained to Sarah how her handkerchief had helped clear the misunderstanding about the fight and, on top of that, helped me land a job.
Oh, that's what happened. My dad didn't tell me anything about it. But maybe that's why.
What do you mean?
Suddenly, he called me yesterday and told me not to casually hand out business cards with my personal information on them.
Hearing this, I broke out in a cold sweat internally. He was probably talking about me. No matter that I had ended up helping his daughter, I might have been a man with ulterior motives. Does he see that possibility in me?
I told him I didn't hand them out casually and only gave them to people I felt comfortable with. Then he said, "So you liked him too?" And I had no idea what he was talking about.
Now I had to be careful not to smirk. It seems that Kevin, Sarah's father, has been very kind to me, and I'm very grateful.
Dad seems to like you, Bob. He always appreciates people who act selflessly for others. Isn't it common for people to avoid unpleasant tasks and push them onto others? He just can't stand that.
I used to be like that too. I always thought someone else would handle the tasks I didn't want to. But after joining my current company and seeing the actions of a colleague I admire, I realized I had to change. That colleague always took the initiative, even for tasks outside of his official duties, like cleaning or giving guidance to younger employees. I've been lucky with my company. Everyone around me is great. Everyone works with passion, which has a positive effect on the entire team. Everyone naturally takes the initiative in their work, and it turns into joy instead of pain. Seeing that made me want to change for the better.
That's a wonderful mindset.
From that point, Sarah and I occasionally went out for meals and drinks as friends, and a few months later, we started dating. Of course, I also paid a visit to her father, Kevin, to formally introduce myself, and he readily gave his blessing.
You'll always help people in need in the future, right, Pop?
Of course, that's how I want to be. Even if I could go back in time and see you in trouble again, I'd still want to help, but try not to get into any trouble, okay?
I know.
At that moment, as we were walking in the park, a child fell and started crying in front of us.
Are you okay? You scraped your knee.
Sarah immediately approached the child. A young boy, about 3 years old, had a small scrape on his knee with a bit of blood. Looking around, there was no sign of his parents. Let's wash that off at the faucet. Okay, I'll carry you. I picked up the boy and carried him to a nearby water fountain.
It might sting a bit, but hang in there.
Sarah took out a handkerchief, wetted it, and gently wiped the boy's scrape. The boy bravely tried to hold back his tears, looking so pitifully endearing. As I watched, I was reminded how this handkerchief from Sarah shaped our destiny. After a while, the little boy's parent came rushing over. It was a mom holding another little child. She'd lost sight of her kid for a moment and he'd run off, so she was searching worriedly for him. She repeatedly thanked me and then left with her still tear-faced boy. In that boy's hand, he held Sarah's handkerchief. Maybe he's got a crush on you, too.
If so, I'd be honored.
I took Sarah's hand and we began to walk. Guess I'll have to get Sarah a new handkerchief soon. And I'm thinking of getting her to adorn that generous hand of hers that brings kindness to others. My family runs a tomato farm. Though it is a small farm run by my dad and mom, grew popular, quality tomatoes. They have been dealing with the famous Italian chain, Thompson Foods, for over 10 years. Even the CEO personally asked me. Since childhood, my dream was to take over from my dad. As soon as I graduated from a local agricultural school, I joined the family business. But then, my dad started having health issues, and to be in and out of the hospital, there was so much more I wanted to learn from him and prayed for his recovery every day. But when I turned 22, he passed away. It was heartbreaking, made me upset, but I had a mission to protect my dad's tomatoes. Every day, my mom and I worked tirelessly on our farm. Sometimes, my childhood friend, Emily, would come to help. Emily's family runs a large organic farm around here. If you have time to help us, don't you have your own work to do?
No worries. We have a lot of staff. Plus, I love your tomatoes, James.
Her tin face, big round eyes, and her dimpled smile was so bright. Hearing her say that, my heart raced.
You should just tell your feeling to her already. It's annoying just watching.
My mom muttered so only I could hear. I felt that I blushed to the ears, so I pretended not to hear and walked away. My unrequited love for 15 years still bore no fruit. It was more difficult than tomato farming. 3 years had passed since my dad's death, and I had turned 25. Fortunately, our tomato business was thriving, partly thanks to the recent tomato craze, and sales were on the rise. The trick to stress the tomatoes to the limit to bring out their sweetness was tough, but my mom hammered the nuances into me. One day, our top client, Thompson Foods, contacted us saying they were sending over a new representative to introduce themselves. They're a loyal customer who buys 40% of our tomatoes. Their previous rep was Mr. Wood, a veteran who had helped us since my dad's generation, but he was retiring and a younger guy was replacing him. I wanted to build a good relationship with the new rep, so I was geared up from the morning of their visit.
Nice to meet you, I'm Jackson. I'll be taking over from here. Look forward to working with you.
The young-looking guy, Mr. Jackson, arrived in a flashy sports car. He was dressed in a stylish suit and shiny leather shoes. I was taken aback because Mr. Wood was a more modest man. "I'm James. Look forward to working with you two." I extended my right hand to him respectfully, but he just snorted, "As long as I'm in charge, I'll judge strictly by results. Don't lump me in with unimpressive old guys like Wood, who've been stuck in the same position for years. I'm an elite, chosen from within Thompson." His words were so abrupt and made me take aback. With no attempt to hide his condescending attitude, he took a quick look at me, then ostentatiously covered his nose with his towel.
For now, show me your greenhouse.
He looked at me as though I was something dirty, then started to walk. Inside, I was thinking, what the hell is he? But I managed to guide him around with a smile. However, even while he was inspecting the tomatoes in the greenhouse, his rude attitude didn't change. I picked a ripe tomato and handed it to him, asking, "How is it?" But he said, "Well, it's just ordinary, right? Nothing different from the others." He complained about everything, and after looking around the greenhouse for about an hour, he said, "Well, I'll be back. I think your tomatoes, to be frank, are expensive. Oh, I mean, considering their quality. We're a major company, so we don't mind paying, but your tomatoes are expensive and they don't have any special features." As he brushed the dirt off his shoes with a disgusted expression, he told me,
"We're going to reconsider the purchase price. I'll contact you later."
With that, he quickly got in his car. "Wait a minute. The purchase price is at its absolute minimum. We have a long-standing relationship with your company, so we always deliver the highest quality one." I grabbed the closing door and shouted,
"The highest at this level. That's why the subcontractor in the countryside is troublesome. You should study more. There are plenty of tomatoes of this quality to be found."
He spat out his words, slammed the door, and gone. What the hell was that? I shouted in frustration, but all that remained was the smell of gasoline. From that day on, his unreasonable demands continued. He said things like lower the purchase price by 30%, and even if it's lowered, we should still deliver better quality tomatoes. It was utter nonsense. This is just bullying farmers, isn't it? Why would they let such a jerk handle the on-site operations? I found myself venting to my mom over beers at dinner.
He's apparently a relative of the chief of Thompson, you know. He's an elite graduate from MIT, and everyone says it's a sure bet that he'll be an executive in the future.
My mom sighed too. What does the company's internal affairs have to do with the farmers like us? Angered, I finished off the beer in my glass. Didn't the CEO of Thompson used to be close with Dad, right? Didn't he come to buy our tomatoes directly? I asked my mom as I reminisced about the past. I think I met the CEO once when I was in elementary school.
Oh yes, Thompson was a small company back then. And the CEO was deeply impressed by Dad's tomatoes and visited us many times.
Is there no way to complain directly to the CEO about him? My mom shook her head with a smile.
He's become a big shot who even appears on TV now. There's no way he remembers people like us from a small farm.
As she said this, I nodded in agreement. But if things continued like this, our wholesale prices would be driven down. Yet, we can't afford to stop our dealings. Thompson Foods is a client we can't afford to lose. Mr. Jackson will come to discuss contract renewal tomorrow. What should I do? My words were met with a troubled expression from my mom. As expected, when he came the next day, he firmly insisted on a reduction in the purchase price.
"That's why I'm saying tomatoes at your level are a dime a dozen, don't you understand? We're doing business out of charity. You should be more aware of your status."
His irritated voice echoed throughout the greenhouse. My mom and Emily, who were harvesting, looked over at us with worry.
The one who would be troubled if our dealings stop is you, right? A tiny farm like yours should be grateful just to be able to trade with a big corporation like Thompson. So, from the next season, we'll need this price.
Saying this, he slammed a new contract in front of me. Being called tiny got to me. I don't think our tomatoes are common goods. At the price listed here, we can't supply our tomatoes. What? He is glaring at me? He grabbed a tomato from a nearby branch. This is all you're worth, and yet you have the audacity to talk back to me, a city elite like me, challenged by a country bumpkin. Without hesitation, he threw the tomato to the ground. The red fruit squished and splattered.
What the hell are you doing, idiot?
The one who yelled out was Emily. As she ran towards us, she carefully picked up the fallen tomato.
Do you have any idea how much sweat and time we pour into growing just one of these? How on earth can you supervise farmers without understanding even this? It's you who needs to hit the books again.
Her eyes widened in anger as she glared at him.
What the hell is this girl?
He had been eyeing Emily up and down, suddenly realized, oh, I thought your face looked familiar. You're the girl from that organic farm, ain't you? So what? Emily shot back.
You sure do have a sharp tongue. You know your family does business with us, right? How about I consider cutting it off?
He stepped up to Emily with smirking and pleasantly. Emily's complexion changed. It's no surprise, Emily's family sells half of their vegetables to Thompson. If their trade were to stop, it would be a massive blow. He laughed loudly upon seeing the frustrated look on Emily's face.
Every single one of you, all these countryside subcontractors, no manners at all. Well, I'm kind-hearted. I might consider forgiving you if you apologize and say sorry.
Emily's face was flushed red with anger. He insisted, come on, apologize already. He stepped up to Emily once again. She's not involved in this. Please, for my sake, let it go. After saying that, I apologized him and said that I'm sorry.
James.
I could hear Emily's desperate voice, but I kept apologizing to him.
Well, as long as you understand. Just make sure to sign these papers. I'll be back to collect them next week.
I could hear his footsteps as he left the greenhouse, and I stood up. When she looked at me with a tearful face, she could only say, I'm sorry. Before running away, my mom gave a gentle pat on my shoulder as I stood there blankly.
You did well.
Those words left me no option but to laugh. I was racking my brain over it all week, and I decided not to renew my contract with Thompson. I realized I couldn't deal with Mr. Jackson any longer. We may be just a small farm, but I do have my pride. Above all, I couldn't tolerate how he treated Emily. On the day of the contract renewal, as I was waiting for him to arrive, Emily brought an unfamiliar man.
This is our representative, Mr. Daniel.
After she introduced us, I greeted him with a nice to meet you. He looks like the same age as me. Unlike Mr. Jackson, he was a friendly-looking man with a calm smile.
This is not our first time meeting, don't you remember?
With a smile, Mr. Daniel asked, and I stared at his face. Have we met somewhere before? Just as I asked, we heard the loud engine sound and Mr. Jackson's car pulled up.
Daniel, what are you doing here?
Mr. Jackson came out from the car, acting superior even towards Mr. Daniel.
I've invited someone here today. I thought you should meet him too.
Someone?
Yes, oh, it seems he's arrived.
Just as Mr. Daniel said so, a luxurious black car pulled up and stopped right in front of us. The one who came out was the CEO of Thompson, whom I had seen several times on TV.
The CEO?
The first to shout in surprise was Mr. Jackson. The CEO glanced at Mr. Jackson and then stopped in front of me without saying anything.
It's been a long time. hasn't it, James? 15 years, I guess. I'm deeply sorry I couldn't make it to your father's funeral.
He said so and apologized. I had no idea what was going on.
I've heard the entire story. It's embarrassing that such an employee is in our company. It's all my fault. Please forgive me.
As he continued to apologize, I was even more panicked. However, Mr. Jackson was even more panicked than me. He is standing still, his face pale as a ghost.
Jackson.
His loud voice made Mr. Jackson jump like a startled grasshopper.
So, you've been making fun of our valued farmers here and there?
No, not at all. I've not made fun of anyone.
He frantically made excuses, and Emily shouted, "You have. Who made James apologize in front of us?" His face turned even paler as he looked at Emily.
I'm ashamed that I didn't know. It seems that everyone was turning a blind eye to what you were doing because you're the chief's relative. This is a collective responsibility of the chief as well.
At his words, Mr. Jackson's face turned ghost white. This is exactly what you call blood draining from the face.
I was just trying to benefit the company.
Silence,
said with a stern voice. Mr. Jackson went silent. He looked like he was about to cry.
Our job exists because of our farmers. You didn't even understand that while you were working. I'll tell about the punishment later. Get lost.
As Mr. Jackson slouched into his car, Emily shouted, "Apologize to James. Apologize to him in the same way you made him do." Mr. Jackson turned his white face towards me like a puppet and scowled with frustration. "It's okay, Emily."
But
I don't want to stoop to his level. As I said so, Emily nodded. Mr. Jackson then got into his car and drove away. I turned to the CEO and asked, "Thank you, but why?" I was curious as to how he knew about this matter.
I heard it from Daniel here. It seems Emily consulted him.
As he pointed out, I looked at Mr. Daniel. "You?" At that, he smiled and said, somewhat shyly, "It's a secret within the company, but I'm his son." Both Emily and I were surprised and looked at him and the CEO.
He asked if he could borrow my authority as a parent. I was surprised. My son, who had always said he didn't want to be treated specially because he was the CEO's son. What kind of turn of events was this? When I asked him, he told me about this matter.
Upon hearing this, Emily asked Mr. Daniel, "So that's why you said you would handle it yourself, right?" He nodded and said, "James, you might not remember, but when I was in elementary school, I came here with my dad once. We had a lengthy conversation at that time." He said so, I exclaimed, "Bo." It was in the 6th grade. There was a time I had taken out a bird-looking kid who was stuck in a conversation between two adults. "You're the kid from that time." He confirmed my words with a nod.
Back then, you, even at 12 years old, confidently declared your dream to produce tomatoes even better and tastier than your father's. I was moved hearing that. I thought it was amazing for a child to have such a clear vision of what he wants to do in the future.
Recalling that conversation, I remembered what else was said. That time, he had told me, "I will come to buy those tomatoes."
I'm afraid I'm still not capable of purchasing your tomatoes with my own earnings, but I will fulfill this promise one day. Would you wait for me until then?
Saying that, he extended his right hand to me. I nodded and firmly grasped his hand.
In the meantime, make sure you propose to Emily, okay? She's been waiting for you.
He whispered me and smiled. At that moment, I felt my face turn red like a tomato.
what's wrong, James? Your face looks like a tomato.
Hearing Emily's puzzled voice made me blush even more. The chuckles of the president and Mr. Daniel only added to my embarrassment. Afterward, the contract was renewed under new conditions, and it seems like my first love is finally about to bear fruit. Raised in a single mother household, I was always hungry. My mom, who juggled several part-time jobs from early in the morning till late at night, would leave meals for me, but the portion was never enough for a growing sixth grader like me. However, I never complained, no matter how poor or tough it got. All I could do for my mom, who always smiled and stayed cheerful, was to endure. "We're in this together," was Mom's favorite phrase. Hunger was hard every day, but I dreamed of becoming rich one day and letting Mom eat to her heart's content. With this in mind, the only thing I relentlessly worked on was my studies. My daily routine included going to the library for self-study after school. This was also a way to save on heating and air conditioning. I was delighted that modern libraries had water dispensers installed. One day, while searching for books in the library as usual, a wonderful smell wafted in from somewhere. Looking around, I noticed the pleasant smell coming from a high school girl standing next to me. As soon as I took a big whiff, my stomach growled loudly. It was a noise that echoed in the quiet library. Feeling embarrassed, I looked down, but I could sense the girl looking at me.
"Are you, by any chance, hungry?"
she asked in a low voice, and I couldn't respond.
"Come with me."
With that, she grabbed my hand and led me outside. We sat on a bench, and she took something wrapped in aluminum foil from her bag. The smell was coming from that.
"You can eat this if you want."
What she handed to me looked like a piece of pound cake. The delicious smell was irresistible, and I put a piece in my mouth without a second thought. Yum! The sweet taste of butter spread in my mouth. Before I knew it, I had sweets in both hands, and they were all gone in a blink of an eye. I'm sorry. I felt suddenly embarrassed after I finished eating and apologized. However, my mouth and stomach were filled with a happiness I had never felt before. It was so delicious. It's the first time I've ever tasted anything so good. When I said this honestly, the girl seemed like she was about to cry.
"Thank you."
I didn't understand why she was thanking me. I was the one who received the sweets. I thought I should be the one thanking her.
"I'm sorry, you must be confused, but I'm so happy."
She quickly wiped away her tears and gave me a big smile.
"I'm attending a culinary school specializing in pastries. My dream is to become a pastry chef. I'm working part-time at a cake shop while learning to bake, but things aren't going well."
As she said this, the girl looked at me and smiled.
"Oh, I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm Emily Smith, an 18-year-old vocational school student. I often come to this library to look for books about sweets. And you?"
"I'm John Miller, a sixth grader." When I answered, Emily extended her hand to me.
"John, thank you for saying my pastries are delicious."
I gently returned her handshake. "See, I come from a single mother household, and I'm always hungry. Thank you for the meal."
"I don't have a mother. She died shortly after giving birth to me, so it's just me and my dad."
As we shook hands, for some reason, Emily said this happily.
"We seem to be in similar circumstances, don't we? Would you like to be friends?"
she asked, taking me by surprise. A grown woman like her wanting to be friends with someone like me, really?
"Would you like to keep trying the desserts I make?"
Emily said with a broad smile. I thought it was like a dream. Was she really offering to let me eat such delicious treats for free? "Are you sure it's okay?"
"Of course. Nice to meet you."
And so we started to meet every day at the library. Emily brought homemade treats with her every day. Thanks to her, I no longer had to deal with the discomfort of hunger. Sometimes the desserts weren't that great, but when I told Emily honestly, she seemed pleased and asked me passionately what could be improved. As we spent time together like this, we shared many stories. Emily's father is a corporate employee in a big company, and at home, she is always alone. She doesn't have any siblings. In those respects, she and I were just alike, but her family seems to be wealthy beyond comparison with mine. However, the loneliness we both held seemed similar. One day, as usual, I was studying at the library, but there was a problem I didn't understand and Emily was helping me with it. I was completely engrossed in it, and before I knew it, it was pitch dark outside. The closing music was playing in the library.
Oh dear, it's already this late. I'll walk you home, John.
Looking at her wristwatch, Emily hastily stood up. I'm fine. I can go home alone.
That's not okay. What if something happens to you on your own at this hour?
Hearing that, I felt a bit miffed. I'm already 12, you know, and a boy at that. I muttered in my heart, but silently stood up as well. When we got home, my mom, who was supposed to be at work, was waiting, making curry. She forcefully invited Emily into our shabby house and told her to eat dinner.
I always hear about you from John. The desserts you give him have saved his life. I've always wanted to thank you.
Embarrassed to have our tattered house seen, I looked down. My mom said, "What are you acting so good for? You're unusually quiet," and laughed. "Shut up, don't say unnecessary things." In response, my mom thumped my head. Emily was giggling.
Today's our once a month special treat. My pride and joy, homemade curry. Please eat a lot.
Saying so, she put a steaming plate of curry rice in front of Emily. What kind of special treat is this? It's just the usual meatless curry made from leftovers in the fridge. I couldn't help but complain. I wondered what Emily would think of this being called a treat.
Quiet. It contains the best ingredient, a mother's love.
I'd prefer meat to a mother's love. At that, Emily couldn't help but burst out laughing.
I'm sorry. This is my first time having such a fun dinner. Let's eat.
She joins her hands in prayer and begins to eat.
This is delicious,
she says with surprise and starts to eat rapidly with gusto.
Is this tofu? It tastes like meat and it's so tasty.
That's what Emily said as she stared closely at the tofu cut into cube shapes. My mom, looking pleased, said, "Right, you can have as much as you want," and picked up her own spoon. That day, the three of us had seconds of curry and chatted a lot. Emily laughed aloud time and again, looking genuinely happy. The curry that day tasted many times better than usual. Days like these continued, and as I entered junior high, my appetite grew even bigger, and apart from candy, Emily occasionally made sandwiches and lunchboxes for me. They were just as tasty as the candy, and I ate every bit of pieces. After graduating from school, Emily found a job and decided to go to a well-known restaurant in New York. Emily, who had become great friends with my mom, bade us farewell with tears in her eyes and left for New York. 20 years flew by, and I was now a 33-year-old working adult. With my hard studies, I attended a prestigious private college prep high school in my hometown as a special admission student and received a scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. After graduating, I got a job at a well-known corporation and am now able to ease the burden on my mom. I'm not married yet, but work is going well and I'm leading a fulfilling life every day. I occasionally think of Emily, but we haven't met in 20 years. I'm sure she's become a full-fledged pastry chef, making delicious sweets. One day, I was visiting a client's company. After about 2 hours of meetings, I was standing in the elevator lobby when a cleaning lady came out of the emergency exit and almost bumped into me.
I'm sorry.
She backed off in surprise and quickly bowed her head. She was holding a bucket and mop in her hands. "No, I'm sorry for zoning out," I said as I looked at her. Our eyes met. In that moment, I was so shocked that I dropped my bag. Could it be Emily?
John.
We stared at each other as if to bore holes into our faces. Emily had a happy yet shy look on her face, but her face was so thin that I couldn't help but look away. Her body, wrapped in the uniform of a cleaning lady, was also thin as a rail.
I can't believe we're meeting here. You've really grown up.
She murmured, covering her mouth with her hand, we went outside and sat on a bench in a small park nearby.
It's been 20 years. Have you been well?
When she asked that, I nodded. Emily, why are you here? What about your job as a pastry chef? Upon hearing this, Emily twisted her face as if in pain.
I couldn't get along with the people at work. I tried in my own way. Maybe I thought too much and lost my sense of taste due to mental stress. I can hardly taste anything I eat. I can't be a pastry chef like that, can I? I'm now back home and working part-time as a cleaner while going to the doctor. I wanted a job where I wouldn't have to meet many people.
As she said this in a barely audible voice, Emily bowed her head as if in pain. Seeing her too thin shoulders shaking, I felt a heart-wrenching pain. Long ago, Emily was always there to help me, and now she was trembling in such a pitiful state. I want to help Emily. I want to repay her kindness, now more than ever. With these thoughts, I instinctively held Emily's hand. I looked at Emily, who had raised her head in surprise, and said, "From today, please have dinner with me every day. Please say yes." As if I were praying in my heart, I saw Emily nodding her head slightly. From that day forward, I would meet Emily after work every day and go out for dinner. I had learned various things from a friend who is a doctor about the symptoms caused by mental stress, so I made sure to take it easy and to eat in a relaxed environment as much as possible. But no matter how stylish the restaurant or how well known the chef, at first she hardly ate anything.
I'm sorry, John.
Emily always apologized with a guilty look, to which I would reply, "Please don't worry about it. Just being able to talk with you like this makes me happy." Seeing Emily smile with relief and reach for the food was a sight for sore eyes. She chewed slowly, as if trying to taste every bit of the food. As we continued to have dinner together, I noticed that she was slowly beginning to eat more. Repeating in my heart not to rush things, I went ahead and ate at my own pace, not paying any attention to Emily. I thought that would ease her worries. One day, my mom said, "Bring Emily home with you." She had been worried about Emily ever since I told her about Emily's illness on the day we reunited. To our house, why?
I'll cook her a homemade meal.
When I responded to my mom's smiling face, saying, "Even professional chef's dishes she can barely eat, let alone what you make," she pulled my ear hard. Ouch, what was that for?
You really don't understand anything, do you? What Emily needs now is not just delicious food. Just leave it to me.
Reluctantly, I promised to bring Emily home the following Sunday. When Emily arrived at our house, she looked around the room with amazement.
Wow, such a nice house. John, you've really made something of yourself, haven't you?
I used to like our old ramshackle house, you know.
With that, Mom served tea to Emily.
I feel embarrassed for causing trouble for my father.
Nonsense. If it wasn't for Emily's cookies, John wouldn't have grown up the way he did. We can't thank you enough.
When my mom said that, Emily shook her head as if troubled.
My cookies didn't bring happiness to anyone.
Her voice, tinged with sadness, pierced my heart, but my mom simply smiled and said nothing.
Come on, eat. It's special curry.
She placed the pot on the table, and when she lifted the lid, the aroma of spices filled the room. She poured the curry over a small portion of freshly cooked rice and placed it in front of Emily.
John, you eat too. Let's dig in.
Without showing any concern for Emily, my mom started eating her curry. I wondered what she was thinking, but picked up my spoon in silence. Emily also picked up her spoon after saying, "Let's dig in." "Mom, there's no meat in this curry." I blurted out without thinking, not that we were so poor that we couldn't afford meat for our curry.
Didn't I tell you? It's special.
She retorted, "So it's just leftover curry, and Emily came all this way."
Hush, just eat it.
As we exchanged words, I heard Emily murmur,
It's tofu. There was tofu in the curry you gave me before, wasn't there? I remember it was very delicious.
Saying this, Emily took a bite. She swallowed slowly, and then, to my surprise, she murmured, "Delicious." She kept bringing her spoon to her mouth, continuing to eat. In Emily's eyes, large tears welled up.
I don't have a mother. I don't know what home cooking tastes like, but I've always remembered this curry. I wanted to eat it again.
While eating with a joyful expression, Emily kept shedding quiet tears. My mom gently stroked Emily's hair. "Take your time eating. There's no rush," she said, continuing to caress her hair.
It's all right. You can live life at your own pace. Your life is just beginning, Emily. It's okay to move forward slowly and steadily.
At that, Emily began to cry out as if a dam had burst. My mom quietly kept stroking her hair. She didn't stop until Emily's sobbing turned into small hiccups. From that day on, Emily began to increase her food intake. Once a week, she came to our house to eat Mom's home-cooked meals. She seemed to look a bit fuller in the face, to my eyes at least. In the end, when I realized that it was Mom who helped Emily, not me, it stung a bit. But seeing Emily regain her spirit day by day brought me joy. I, leveraging various connections, was looking for a shop where Emily could return to her work as a pastry chef. I believe in the hope that someday I'll be able to taste Emily's delicious pastries again, just like in my dreams.